I'm going to ask a question, and I just want a yes or no answer. I don't want you to tell me if you know the story, okay? How many of you know the story of this little cross?
Yes.
Only one? Okay, a couple of you may have heard the story, and Naomi confessed, I just don't remember. That's one of those things that we do sometimes is we forget, don't we? Take our medicine. I should remember little stories like this one. Okay, I just wanted to know. A church in New York City, I think it was. It's been a long time since I read this story. But I believe it was a church in inner city New York City that had deteriorated and deteriorated and deteriorated and lost members to the point that they were about to have to close their church. And I read this as a true story when I first read it some 10 or 12 years ago. They began to wonder and pray about what they could do to try to revive their church and try to survive. They knew that if they didn't do repair work on the building, that the building was going to fall down. And they knew it was going to be condemned if it didn't fall down so that they couldn't have a place to meet. And the small little congregation had just dwindled to the point that they didn't have the resources. So they didn't know what they were going to do. And then one day, just by mistake, somebody took a picture that was framed in their sanctuary and was going to auction that, or not auction, what do you call, hawk that picture, take it to the, what do you call those places?
Pawn shop.
Yeah, a pawn shop, and see if they could get any money for the picture. And you know what they found out? The picture was worth over $3 million.
Wow.
And nobody knew it. They didn't know the artist, they didn't know anything about it. But that one picture that was hanging there in the sanctuary saved their church. The next Sunday, the minister preached a sermon entitled Hidden in Plain Sight. Hidden in plain sight. Been there all the time. Been there all the time. They just didn't know it. And that's the way so much of our Christian life is. So much of what we need, so much of what would get us through the moment, so much of what would give us strength for another day, so much of it is right there before us all the time, and we just don't see it. We don't take the time to see it. We don't want to see it. We don't have the faith to see it. But it's right there all the time. I want to read one verse from Micah. I bet you'd even have trouble finding Micah in the Old Testament. I bet you it's been a while since you read that for your morning devotional. And we're going to read one verse from Micah chapter 5, verse 2. But you, O Bethlehem of Ephrathah, are one of the little clans of Judah. From you shall come forth for me one who is to rule in Israel, whose origin is from old, from ancient days. But you, O Bethlehem, who are one of the little clans of Judah. From Bethlehem. There's a lot of significance about Bethlehem. We know the significance of it. Bethlehem was a place of historic significance. It was the place where David had been made king. It was a place that now, though, was just a lazy little village 7 miles from Jerusalem. But in that lazy little village 7 miles from Jerusalem, something spectacular happened. God came into the world. So you see, it's not a matter of how big you are. It's not a matter of how much you have. It's the significance of the little things in our life that make all the difference in the world. And like I said, the Christian life, the Christian story is like that. We find things all the time that are hidden in plain sight. They've been there all along, and we just didn't see them. There were a lot of places that were more significant than Bethlehem. I don't know if you've ever been there or not. Going there was a spiritual experience for me. Still remember riding the 7 miles from Jerusalem on a bus, pulling into this sleepy little town. Of course, there were thousands of tourists there when I was there. Maybe not thousands, but a lot. And going to the place where Jesus was supposedly born. It was just a great experience to see that. You know what it was? Just a small little clan. A little clan. You're one of the little clans. But it was there that Jesus came. It was just an ordinary place, an unlikely place for the King of the world to come and be born. You know why we don't see Jesus sometimes? Because we're looking in the wrong places. You know why we can't find him in our lives in the time of our deepest need? Because we're looking in the wrong places. You know why we don't experience him sometimes? Because we try to experience him the wrong way. We think that we've done everything we can do and we don't want to give anymore, and that's exactly what God wants us to do, is to give just a little bit more. And when we do, we find out that there's something there that we've never seen before, that we've never experienced before. Why was Jesus born in Bethlehem? Why wasn't he born in Jerusalem? Why wasn't he born in the temple? The temple had such meaning for the Jewish people. Why wasn't that the place that God chose for his son to come into the world? Well, I think it was because God wanted to teach us an important lesson. He wanted to teach us an important lesson. And that is that he comes to us most often through the ordinary and not through the extraordinary. Occasionally, we will hear a testimony of something that was completely miraculous. Occasionally, we will, but it's very rare. But for most of us, there are no visions, there are no personal encounters, there's no feeling of the nail-scarred hands, not not seen his face. Haven't had any of those things that people might expect for someone who sees Jesus. What we do is just in ordinary ways, in ordinary days, all of a sudden, here he is. Make no mistake, don't misunderstand me, because I want you to know that I have felt God's presence with me in the greatest ways. And I have left knowing that I have been in the presence of Jesus so many times. From this little church, from my daily devotional, from the hardest day that I've lived, I've left knowing that I've been in the presence of Jesus. So make no mistake, I'm not trying to say that it's not miraculous. I'm not trying to say that it's not real. Because I have been revived. I have been invigorated. But mostly that's happened through the events of everyday living. Can I share some of those with you? The birth of my children. See two beautiful babies, so perfect, with all their fingers, all their little fingernails, and with all the irresponsibility at the bottom end, they still were great. And I saw God. In my call to ministry. Scared me to death. Didn't think I could ever do it. Didn't think I could stand in front of people and give a sermon. But I knew that's what he wanted. And in that, I saw Jesus. On the day of my salvation. When I was 9 years old, and again I was scared to death when I stepped out of that back pew and walked down to the front of the church and said to the pastor, I still remember what I said. I shook his hand. I said, I want to be saved. I didn't know a lot. Knew two things. Knew one, that I was a sinner. I knew that Jesus died for me. He took me back into the back room and he sat down and he talked to me and Judy Alexander for about 15 or 20 minutes, explaining to us what it meant. And I came away from there and I saw Jesus. I knew God in a way that I'd never known him before. Sitting on the side of the bed, one of my church members who was about to die. I saw Jesus. I saw him. In you, in your ministry to God through this church, I've seen Jesus so many times. I've left knowing that God was here. Because he was here in you. in just knowing that some of you care enough to take somebody to the doctor. Take time out of your life to go and make sure that somebody was taken care of. Listening to you talk about your ministry to other people. I've seen God. Through nature, particularly as a teenager, sitting out in the pine trees behind my dad's house, laying on a bed of pine needles, laying on my back, looking up and talking out loud to God. I saw him. And I knew that he was so real. In the innocence of children. Little children. So sweet and so sincere. I've seen God. Through the embrace of adults. Have you ever had $1 million hug? A lot of them. I'll tell you real briefly about one. 2 years ago at Christmas, I was at Steinwart in Hendersonville. And I saw a person from First Baptist Church of Goodlettsville. And that person, when they saw me, turned their back and walked away. And wouldn't even say hello. It crushed me, literally. That was on a Friday. 2 days later, went to, what's the Mexican restaurant over?
Casa Vieja?
The one that, not Rio Bravo, Casa Vieja. The other Casa Vieja, not the one over there. I went in with a group of you to eat lunch. And there sat at the table a family that had joined First Baptist Church Goodlettsville when I was there. They got up immediately, the father of the family got up immediately and came and shook my hand and brought me over to see his family. And when his wife saw me, she stood and she hugged me. And that was that $1 million hug. Bless her heart, she has cancer now and may not survive. In the embrace of adults. In laughter with friends. Isn't it a good thing to have a gut laugh with a friend? Wow. And in that, you can see God. And sometimes you can see God through the tears of concern. When you see somebody who's concerned about somebody else and you see the tears just flow. And you see God. And you know what's so unique about all this? Most of the time when I've seen God, I didn't even know it until I looked back on it. Wasn't even aware of it when it happened because it was just an ordinary thing on an ordinary day. An ordinary day like happened in the life of the innkeeper in Bethlehem, who got up and saw just a poor Jewish baby. And there, hidden in plain sight, was the King of the world. And he could have held that king in his hands. but he probably didn't even pay him any attention. And that's how easy it is for us to miss Jesus. And you know why we miss him most of the time? Because we're not looking for him. Because we aren't yearning for him. Because we don't want to see him. And we don't expect to see him. Because we don't expect to see him in the ordinary. And that's where he shows up. We look for him in the cathedrals. And he's in line at Walmart. We look in Jerusalem. And he's in Bethlehem. Bethlehem, you're just a small clan. Just a little insignificant little town. But it's there that we meet Jesus. Read your Bible. He never showed up in the expected places. He was expected in king's palaces, and he showed up in a stable. He was expected with pomp and splendor in Jerusalem, and he showed up in that little town of Bethlehem. He was expected to teach in the temple, but instead he was in a fishing boat, talking to the crowd standing on the hillside. He was expected to dine with the priests and kings, but instead he walked and talked with tax collectors, went to their house and had lunch, and he talked to the prostitutes that nobody wanted to have anything to do with. He was expected to make some great political statement. And instead he went and died on an old rugged cross. Common events of everyday life. That's where people have always found Jesus. About 10 or 12 years ago, I preached a sermon, and I used that illustration about that church in New York. And I said, as a modern illustration, that I could explain what it meant to be hidden in plain sight. When I was working at Park Place in Hendersonville, one day I met this lady. Her friend had been telling me about her. He said, "You need to meet Norma Jean." And so we tried to go meet Norma Jean. He said, "She'll be at the Stars and Stripes restaurant today. Let's go meet her." So we went to Stars and Stripes to have lunch. And when we got back, we found out that Norma Jean and her friend Mary had come by the car lot where I was working, and we missed her. And so for 6 months, a year, Lester would say, "You need to meet Norma Jean." And then the next day he'd say, "Oh, that'd never work. That'd never work." Then a day or two later he'd say, "You need to meet Norma Jean." And then he'd say, "Oh, that'd never work." And then one day, after I quit selling cars, I called Lester, still kept up with him, and I asked him how Mary was doing. And he said, "Well, he's doing fine, but she lost her job." I said, "You don't have a job for her, do you?" And I said, "Well, I never met Mary." I said, "As a matter of fact, I have a job, but I said, I don't think she wants it. It's just to be my secretary, be the receptionist." He said, "She'll be there in the morning." So in the morning, I hired Mary to be my receptionist secretary. 3 or 4 months passed, and our bookkeeper quit. She said, I'd like to apply for the bookkeeper job. And I said, okay, but you gotta find somebody to cover for you for the secretary receptionist job while we train you. She said, Norma Jean will do it. And so the next morning, I walked up to her. I gave her a big hug. I said, finally, a face with a name. And for 3 years, she chased me. I tried to get her to go out with me, and she wouldn't. She didn't want to go out with a Baptist preacher. Didn't want to have anything to do with it. And there I was all the time, hidden in plain sight. And finally, 3 years later, she saw me. And then she asked me to marry her. She didn't really ask me.
Next week I'm going to do the preaching.
That's right.
She didn't really ask me. I asked her. But she said yes. And after I preached that sermon, she had this made for me, this book. You can't read it, but right there it says, hidden in plain sight. It's worth $1 million. Wouldn't take the lottery winnings tonight for it. That's a lot more than $1 million. I'm sorry for the hard times that I've caused her. But I sure am glad she finally let me catch her. I've been there all the time. Hadn't changed. But her heart changed. God changed it somehow. And God brought us together, and I believe that with everything. And that's the way God does. God doesn't work in the ways that we expect him to sometimes. When people found out Jean had married a Baptist preacher, they said, you did what? She had to do a lot of explaining. God may not work like you want him to. God may not work like you expect him to. But God's working. He's working. Wants to work in your life. Wants to work in your heart. Wants to work on the most difficult situation you can imagine right now. He wants to work on what's bothering you the most right at this very minute. And somehow there's an answer out there. And it may very well be hidden in plain sight. Open your eyes. Open your heart. Just listen. Just look. Just pray. Just ask. I think the answer will be there. God, for all those things that we search for all those things we need, help us to find them in you. In Jesus' name I pray. Our hymn this morning is, I Need Thee Every Hour. Not a more appropriate song in the hymn for us to sing, because we need it. I'll be here at the front if there's something you need to share with me or the church. I probably ought to explain that part of my emotion today and Jean's emotion today is because of our need. We've been through tough times. We're still going